here's a video that went viral of Gurner Group CEO and multimillionaire property developer in Australia, Tim Gurner. This was a rant that he went on that went viral, got about 23 million views on Twitter. And so let's hear from Tim Gurner, who looks like Scott Weiland from the Stone Temple Pilots had he done even more drugs. That's what this guy looks like to me. It's the first thing I thought of when I saw him. But let's hear his opinion on the post-pandemic labor market and how we fix things back to the pre-pandemic normalcy. Keep in mind, by the way, this is the same guy who made news a few years ago when he said that the reason why young people couldn't buy houses is because they were spending too much money on avocado toast. Same guy. So let's hear from Tim Gurner.
I think the problem that we've had is that we have people decided that they didn't really want to work so much anymore through COVID, and that has had a massive issue on productivity. Tradies have definitely pulled back on productivity. They have been paid a lot to do not too much in the last few years, and we need to see that change. We need to see unemployment rise. Unemployment has to jump 40, 50% in my view. We need to see pain in the economy. We need to remind people that they work for the employer, not the other way around. I mean, there's been a systematic change where employees feel the employer is extremely lucky to have them, as opposed to the other way around. So it's a dynamic that has to change. We've got to kill that attitude, and that has to come through hurting the economy, which is what the whole global, the world is trying to do. The governments around the world are trying to increase unemployment to get that to some sort of normality. And we're seeing it. I think every employer now is seeing it. I mean, there is definitely massive layoffs going off. People might not be talking about it, but people are definitely laying people off, and we're starting to see less arrogance in the employment market, and that has to continue because that will cascade across the cost balance.
Okay. Now, the key word in that whole monologue there is normality. Normality. What he's expressing here is commonplace amongst the capitalist class, amongst ownership, amongst management. This is a very normie, mainstream view amongst these people. This is how they view labor. This is how capital views labor. So no, we do not have a problem. Courtney, sorry to single you out again, but I know you're a good sport about it because you give it to us a lot. So that's all good. It's not a problem of corporatism. This is a problem of capitalism. This is fundamentally how capitalists view workers. This is what it's all about. And he views normalcy as a dynamic where people with capital can exploit people without capital. That is how he sees the status quo. That was the status quo before the pandemic, and that is the status quo that he wants to usher in once again. He puts it there very, very simply, very, very confidently, very calmly, very straightforwardly. There's no mystery about his intention. Now, because that went viral, he did issue an apology to the Daily Mail. Tim Gurner, Rich Lister boss, issues groveling apology after declaring unemployment needs to rise by 50% because workers are paid too much and too arrogant. Let's read his apology, which he gave to this newspaper. At the AFR Property Summit this week, I made some remarks about unemployment and productivity in Australia that I deeply regret and were wrong, he said in a statement. There are clearly important conversations to have in this environment of high inflation, pricing pressures on housing and rentals due to a lack of supply, and other cost of living issues. There is no lack of supply. There is no lack of supply. I don't know about Australia. I know in New York, I forget the exact number, but there are a lot of empty apartments out there. So this idea that there's a lack of supply is nonsense. My comments were deeply insensitive to employees, tradies, and families across Australia who are affected by these cost of living pressures and job losses. I want to be clear. I do appreciate that when someone loses their job, it has a profound impact on them and their families. And I sincerely regret that my words did not convey empathy for those in that situation. He says, I want to be clear. I appreciate that when someone loses their job, it has a profound impact on them. He doesn't say, I want to be clear. I respect workers and want them to be paid better. He didn't say that. He said, I appreciate that when they lose their job, it's tough. So he's apologizing for calling for a 50% spike in unemployment. He's not apologizing, even in this apology that he issued, he's not apologizing for his attitude towards workers. Not at all. Not at all. He told you exactly what he thought there. And he apologized because it went viral. Same thing when the climate activists crashed that fundraiser for the Massachusetts governor, and the rich guy, I forget his name, Bruce Parsley, I think his name was, he got caught on camera telling the young activist girl, I don't mind if you die, right? He went and he issued an apology. Why? Because the video went semi-viral. That's why he said he was sorry. He didn't say he was sorry because he was actually sorry. He said he was sorry because people actually saw him for who he is. And this is the ultimate conflict that is accelerating in intensity right now. And this is why when you hear people like Crystal Ball and Kyle Kulinski talk about all the progress that's been made for labor because of Biden's appointments to the NLRB, this is why those ultimately ring so hollow. Because ultimately, a bureaucratic instrument like the NLRB is not going to be able to stave off this ultimate showdown between labor and capital, because that is what's coming. That is what Karl Marx said was coming. He said capitalism will end in a series of ever-intensifying crises that occur with greater and greater frequency. Hello? Tell me that's not right on the money, right? And this is what we're talking about. So none of these sort of half measures, right? None of these sort of piecemeal accomplishments can actually stave off this showdown, because we are in a state where this divide has just become so unbelievably pronounced to the point where everybody can see it, to the point where guys like this feel so confident that they can just sit up on stage and say, yeah, no, we have to return to a normality in which workers are grateful that they have a job in the first place. Not that capitalists, not that owners are grateful that workers are willing to exchange their time for a wage that ultimately, as we know, is not connected to the growth of the company. If it was, wages will be much higher. We know that, right? So this is a conflict that is inevitable. It's a conflict that has become so much more dramatic now than it's ever been, because the masks are coming off. And so this is why, ultimately, at the end of the day, this conflict is going to end in struggle. And there's going to be winners and there's going to be losers. And the fact that you have a council at the NLRB now that is more friendly to union drives than Trump's council, yeah, I mean, you want to call that progress of a kind, call it progress of a kind. That's progress the way reusable bags instead of plastic bags are progress in terms of staving off, some apocalyptic event. It's nowhere near enough. It's not nearly enough to reverse the trajectory, that we're on now. Not even close.
Please clap.